Welcome to the Motivated Martial Arts Podcast. Your hosts, Jackson White and Gavin Cook, have been friends and Taekwondo training partners for over 40 years. This podcast will bring you a mixture of their life stories, martial arts, and business experiences to motivate you in life and throughout your martial arts journey. Adding in a mixture of inspiring interviews and some of the best traditional martial artists around today. So over to your hosts, the Motivated Martial Artists.
Welcome to the Motivated Martial Artists Podcast with me, Gavin Cook.
And me, Jackson White.
And this morning we've got Trevor Nicholls on the show. We've been trying to trap Trevor for quite a while to get him on the show, and we're super excited to have him on today. So Trevor is Vice President of the ITF, and he's also the President of the UK arm of the ITF. So we know that Trevor's got lots of good Taekwondo stories, so we're going to try and squeeze them out of you this morning, Trevor. So thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, good morning, and thank you for the invitation.
Was my intro correct there?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you've done very well. UK. I mean, the names and brands are, seem to alter, what's needed, don't they? I mean, I can give you like where UK ITF is where it is today, but of course I started with one school back in '83 when I left the UKTA.
Right,
and that was
before you tell us about that one school, though, Trevor, just give us a little bit of give our listeners that may not know you from the world of martial arts, just give them a little bit of background on yourself, where you grew up, schooling, and eventually, I suppose, how you got into martial arts.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, my sort of background, I'm from a local authority housing estate with my parents. My father was in the Second World War. He served on the Burma campaign, and he carries the Burma Star. My mother worked for the local authority in school meals and education, as a school meals assistant, not as a teacher. It was a great upbringing with my mum and dad, but we were not in any way gifted with anything. I had three brothers, and we would have to ask to enter the fridge. We couldn't just go open the fridge door. We'd have a banana for our dessert, but it would be shared between the four of us. None of those things at the time would seem unreasonable. Today, that might seem tough. But certainly in my upbringing, that was an accepted norm, that we would share everything we had. My father being in the Second World War, his sort of mentality was one of quite a strict regime, but not to the point of hurtful or hard line, but just we should be expected to do these things, some chores, some help, some assistance to the family. In fact, very often my father was sort of back in the 70s was branded a 20th century man. He would do the cooking and do the washing, and he would do the ironing, and he would do many activities which he, some fathers in that era would not do. And he would expect his four boys to participate in that. And he got away with it, of course, being pretty much a war hero. And he served with Louis Mountbatten.
Right, okay.
That was his sort of Navy days. And in fact, the boat that's up in London, it's called the Belfast. There's a Navy destroyer moored in London on the Thames, and that was one of the boats he served on. So, it's quite close to the heart there. And in fact, when you go on, onto the boat and you stand in the turret that he stood in during the Second World War, it is one of the most strangest feelings I think anyone can have. That back in the 40s, he stood here loading the guns to defend the UK. But that's sort of where I come out of. And then it wouldn't be unusual for 10-year-olds to go do a paper round and be out there in the streets working, and as I did. In fact, the paper rounds were for 10-year-olds, and I got a paper round at 9. So I had to get my brother to get the papers out, and then I would go deliver them. So it was a great time of learning and being part of the community. And around that time, I suppose I was 10 then, back in 70s, I started a little bit of judo.
Okay.
But I wasn't comfortable with it, but I did start a little bit of martial arts, a little bit of activity. And then I had a friend whose whose mother was an usher in a cinema. So they used to let people into the cinemas to watch films, and there was this new film out. It was a David Chang, and it was the Seven Golden Vampires. Right. And it was being shown at the cinema, and because she was an usher there, we got through the fire exit doors to watch this film. Right. And I was really taken back by the martial arts within it. I thought, I want to change out of judo and do something like this, and that was quickly followed by Bruce Lee, of course, and Enter the Dragon.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Classic.
Yep.
It's funny when we get people on the podcast. So many stories start off from Enter the Dragon. Going forward.
Oh, without doubt. And that was it. And I just went to the local club that was, had a poster with some kick in the air, Yeah. And that club was where I started Taekwondo. Wow. And that was in 1973.
Yeah, that's a fantastic year. That's the year I was born. That's a real good year. But it's, as Gavin said, it's really interesting because I suppose back in the 70s, even in the 80s, people didn't have the choice of martial arts. People just walked to the nearest center, and whether it was a karate club or a taekwondo club or whatever it was, and that's what they joined because it was in the local vicinity. So really, I suppose for a lot of our senior practitioners, myself included, it was really just good luck and fortune, I suppose, to the type of martial arts you moved into.
No, you're absolutely right, Jackson. It was just, did it look like the right kind of school, and was it? And of course, they were very busy then. I mean, back in the 73, I was only involved with one taekwondo. It was the ITF, so there wasn't many brands of the style. So taekwondo would have been just ITF style, rather than what there is now in WT, which I'm sure we'll get on to later on. But and by chance, it just happened to be a club that was of good quality and good standard, and I never looked back on it. Raymond Choi was the instructor of that club.
Whereabouts was that club, Trevor?
I was in Hillingdon, down in Middlesex here, London. And he opened a school which was linked to Brunel University, a big university. Gone are these days, but when you start that club in the September time would be Freshers' Day at the Brunel University. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you would have over 100 people queuing to join that club each year from 73 through to about 80. Wow. From Freshers' Day. There wasn't so many choices, but the choice they did have was one of those, and 100 people queuing to sign up every night after Freshers' Day.
That's mad, isn't it?
It is.
Can you remember when you first walked into that dojang and you first saw these people kicking and punching in their pajamas, making weird noises? What was it that what was it that really drew you to it, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, luckily the instructor Raymond Choi was of sort of a Chinese look as well, so he was fitting the part after the Bruce Lee experience and all the others. So this is the real thing. And you mentioned pajamas there. Yes, they were in white doboks, but of course my family, as we mentioned, was not the wealthiest. I actually trained my first night in a pair of pajamas, and that's without a blue stripe. To this day, I can remember wearing them because it was the loosest thing that I could wear. And that's the things we could afford. We couldn't afford tracksuits and things, but there was just this sort of air of discipline and people striking, and this sort of value of, this could make a change in my life to become a little bit of a fighter or a combat side of things, and there was an impressiveness about what they could do. There were some early people there, Roger Koo and that. I don't know if those names have ever come across you, but Koo Karate, I think he is now. But those were the early names within that club.
Right. So what was it?
Pair of pajamas.
So when did you start realizing this is something that you wanted to do? What was it the pattern side of it? Was it the sparring side? Could you kick? What was the bit that you thought, oh, I'm good at this, now I need to move and get better at other areas?
Yeah, when I started, I was sort of in the 73 era there. So I was only 11, 16, I was 11, 12, 11, So sparring was difficult because in them days there was no children's classes. It was, you were all in the same class. There wasn't a 5 to 7 group or a 7 to 11 group, it was like adults and kids together. Yeah. So although sparring was I enjoyed, I was the younger of the group always, and I wasn't bullied, but I certainly didn't. I was never going to win that event in them days. So I got involved more on the pad work, the striking, and the strength. Then sparring, and then my latter bit was more about pattern work. Pattern work, I didn't really understand at that age. What repetition of movement is. Yeah. Why left and right sides. All that. I just wanted to hit the pad as hard as I could and feel a bit tough, I suppose. But then as things developed, I then started to spar, and sparring become my sort of more enjoyable side as I got older and more able to sort of mix with the big boys.
Sure. I imagine back in those days, well, having been in those days, there were no pads, no head guards. You were lucky if you had a set of bumper mitts if you were posh.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
Just used to stand in the line, used to have all the black belts, all the adults, and as a kid, you just used to go along, didn't you? Okay, another adult, I've got to fight. Another adult, I've got to fight. Oh, now with the black belts, these guys are really going to rough me up.
Yeah, and there were some ones that Peter Saunders, Gary Bolger, all those. They like to have a little bit of a game with you. Yeah. In fact, there's a picture on a Throwback Thursday last week of when I think I was a black tag or black belt down in all right, so that old picture now, but it was sort of, there was all the big lads and then I was the small one at the end, but you can't change history, can you?
No.
It was such a great camaraderie though in those days as well, wasn't it? Because you really formed bonds with these people, and quite often on certainly for me and Jackson on a Friday night or a Sunday morning, we used to come out bruised and battered from fighting these adults, but we used to love it, and you used to, and the kids, the adults used to respect you as well to a degree.
No, you're absolutely right. And that was your challenge. Although they were strong, and in them days, and I'm sure some of your other guests, you was in a hall, and the sparring was about who could go through the fire exit doors first.
Well, you could slam up against the radiator.
The radiator. I mean, you imagine that today, but that's what it became. And they did mix you with a bit of respect if you stood your ground a little bit. They went a bit stronger, but it's very valued. And you don't want to say that's when martial arts was it? Because there are some great fighters today, aren't there? There's some great exponents.
And I think it's evolved with society, hasn't it? And and it's like anything. What we did back in those days. You look about it and think, actually, we know so much more now. You wouldn't do that today.
Correct.
Just things like kids punching and breaking boards. My black belt grading, I had to punch the board.
Yeah,
I was 10 years old. My hands have never been right since.
Is that why you can't write?
Yeah, exactly. but that was acceptable then. But it's not acceptable now because I suppose we're more educated, aren't we? We understand sports and physiology and psychology better. And of course, we've embraced that and taken it into the art, which I think has made it better. I think the results or the end game is still the same. We still get these high quality practitioners, both in patterns, breaking and sparring. I think it's the journey that we take people on now to get them there has changed.
Yeah. No, you're right.
I think for the right way as well.
Yes, I think right way physically for what your body can do. Yeah. My only thoughts when you look back on them times. I mean, you mentioned breaking boards then as a youngster. I remember punching tiles for my blue belt grading with Ricky Ha, and my mother was watching the session, and she went up to Ricky Ha afterwards and said, "Why are you making my little boy break tiles?" I said, "That's not quite what you're supposed to do here, Mum. It doesn't really do much for my my manship here." But my only worry is that people have developed. Dave Oliver, Ronnie Sergiu, Jackson, your father, and yourselves, and maybe me, Kenny. But what's following us? There is that real original group that have come out, but and we come through them hardships of the wrong stretching exercises, the wrong conditioning, and all that. But we're still around.
Yeah, very true.
And now all the new ideas, it doesn't seem quite so sustainable for our members. Some way, somehow. I'm not sure. Or maybe it's just because there are more choices.
Or maybe we're lucky that you can now have hip replacements at age 30.
Absolutely.
I think that generation are there. I think, like you say, there's more choice now, isn't there? within martial arts as a whole. I think there's more choice, not just, you know, we were talking only the other night to a guest on a podcast about who our competition is. Well, actually, our competition probably isn't even the martial arts school down the road. It's the gymnastics club or the dance club or the salsa club or the football, the rugby, the tennis, the swimming, the whole plethora of other sports which are available to people now and easily accessible.
Yeah, no, the choice, as you say, is there so much more. I mean, I know it might be also a bit naive of us or me or others, but I refer to Paul, Donnelly, and Kenny because they were my group, if you like. You know, who I was working with, Dave Oliver, Michael Pruitt, Mike Dew, you know, all, Peter Harkus, Derek Campbell. They were all. But if I was to talk to my students now who are 6 degrees, and you know, they wouldn't know them. They might know their era of.
That's right. Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
So it might be a little bit naive. I'm thinking, oh, no one's moving through, but in fact they are. It's just that I don't know who they are.
Well, I think one of the challenges being a grandmaster, I suppose. You get further removed from that group of people. Hence why it's great to get you on the show, so that you know you can. So they can connect with you and understand you and the journey that you've been on.
Yeah, but everybody's era is the best, isn't it? Everyone's era is the best, and that's just the way we are. Isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. And you can talk about the karate and everyone, can't you? But then the ones that are competing now, they are very impressive. You know, when I'm even some of my students when they compete, you think, wow, you know, where's that coming from? You know, where's that ability? And you know, we would be very restricted. So, yeah, I don't want to be too naive on that one. And you're right, everyone's era is the best.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the likes of like Warren Weiss, for instance, you know, the ability that he had, and then like you say, you try and compare that to maybe the ability of like Kenny and Ron and Jackson. You know, it's just a different style, isn't it? It's just different style.
It is a different style. Different needs, isn't it? You know, I suppose if you change the rules in football, if you don't change with them, you're not going to get on. Right, you know, if you change the offside, you've got to change that rule, haven't you? And this is what's happening. You know, the rules have changed in Taekwondo, and the guys that are performing, like you just mentioned, are, you know, conforming to them rules and winning and doing very well at it. Did you
ever? I mean, I know you did compete, but you know, what are some of your sort of competition highlights then, Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, I got my first stand in about 1975, I think, and still on that would have made me 14, 15 on that bit on this side. So I was still younger. I mean, like my competitors were, you know, I obviously come against Kenny a few times. We were okay, but we didn't have all the big weight divisions. It was like you weigh in and split in the middle, and you go
lightweight and heavyweight.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and I was a bit heavier. So I kind of was younger of the group. Although I competed on every tournament, I actually won the British like 7 years in a row on patterns because I was like able to do that without the weight or age difference. And then I started to win the sparring more around the 1979 era when we got in the British team, and me, Kenny, and a few others went to the European Championships in Oslo in 1979. And there I went out there as a sparring member of the team, as well as breaking and patterns. So that was the very first sort of big international I done, was in the 79 when I was a third degree and about 18 then, I suppose. But I found my adult sparring skills more there. I was actually kind of falling into that era of I can compete with you guys, you know. Yeah. And the people that we fought were people like Wim Boss, who's in the other ITF groups now, and you know, many of them names I are now spread amongst other bodies. But yeah, about 1979 was my very first international. And then I was going for the Oklahoma World Championships in Cardiff Castle for the eliminations with Kenny, Kim, Ron, Richard Enfield, all of those. I got selected, and then after an injury, I didn't go, but I was selected for that team to travel out for the Oklahoma Worlds. So that was a big.
You missed a good trip then, apparently.
Yes.
It was always one of the bonuses, isn't it? You have the martial arts side of the trips, which are fantastic. And then you have the social side, and of course the experience as well, because you know getting overseas to see the martial artists, how they do it, different cultures. You know, it's certainly back in the 70s, 80s, that was a big thing. You know, globalization hadn't taken place yet. Certainly listening to some of the stories from my father, he was picked on numerous squads, getting over to Italy, Germany, the US. Some of those trips, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it was when there was a little bit of movement in people moving KTA and moving out of the main body, and I went into a bit of full contact. So I done some full contact fights. I done 3 years of full contacts and went up to the European titles on full contact. So I went more that route, and that really sort of complemented where I was in my early training. I preferred the power and the pads, less arsenal of techniques, but stronger in the ones that you were doing, and that's what full contact allows you to do, of course.
So who are sort of the people you were coming up against in the full contact circuit then?
In that time, there was a bloke called John Orchard. There was Billy Rose. He was in that field. I think Billy Rose was with ITF for a long time. John Orchard down in Brighton was one of our biggest sort of competitors. There's a few other names now that go by me. Ryan Roche. He was. Brian was quite heavy in the full contact side, and it was the PKA then, the Professional Karate Association.
Yeah, sure.
I was fighting under with George Fetis and that group. I had about 7-8 fights in that, and I really enjoyed that actually. I got busted up one time. I always remember losing my ribs and losing my jaw on one of them in the final fight, and on my knee. And there was a lovely little ring girl coming with her little cards, and I was on my knee. And I can always remember saying to her, "It doesn't matter what happens today, we're going to have a drink tonight."
Always thinking about the social, even when you're in the ring.
You've got to when you're injured up a little bit. And then we developed into some summer camps, some big issues up on, and I was then running my own association back in '83, which was then one school. The Nicholls Taekwondo Institute. That's how I took one club KTA and just, that was, I wasn't affiliated with nothing else, just that. And when CAGB left later, I did think about joining up with them. I think in them days was Lynn Evans was much of the lead and people like that. But I didn't go that way. I just stayed where I was and developed from one club to two clubs to, and slowly changed the names from Imperial to UK ITF now.
And still going strong.
Well, we're going strong. The Nicholls Taekwondo Institute was very sort of around my name, and that was a bit, I thought, it just wasn't appropriate for what we were trying to achieve. And then I formed the Imperial Taekwondo because other clubs were joining me. But Imperial become very sort of in its name was as if it was some sort of directorship or, almost a dictator form of the Japanese Imperial armies, and that came under a little bit of criticism. But it was the name for a long time. And then when the ITF was in 2001, when it went 3 ways after the ride, more inclusive, we changed to UK ITF so that it was a broader name. And was more embraced and inclusive. I was actually at the meeting in 2001 when General Choi was alive and passed the mantle to his son Choi Jun-Ma.
Okay.
I was at that meeting. I'll give it as brief as I can. But
yeah,
the ITF. So the ITF was under General Choi, as we know, and Choi Jun-Ma is the son of. Now, everyone was wanting the son to sort of take over from the father because it's the family name. It's the International Taekwondo Federation. The logo is based under the Choi name. So 2001, Choi Jun-Ma said, right, General Choi said, my son will take over. That was in the World Championships. Between that period and the end of the year, the North Korean group, or North Korean Kim Il-sung's sort of era of people, spoke to General Choi and said, will your son give us the Taekwondo? And Choi Jun-Ma said, no, the Taekwondo is for the world, not for a country. So there was lots of little discussions, and then there was a extraordinary meeting in the January of 2002, where General Choi was, because it was his paymaster was the North Koreans, had to expel Choi Jin-wha from the group, and so that he could not take the mantle of ITF officially in that time. And General Choi wanted Chang Un to take over, who was a North Korean IOC member. Everyone was, following General Choi's wishes, blah, blah, blah. Of course, General Choi then dies. And ITF was going to move back into the North Korean arm. Choi Jin-wha set up an alternative ITF because some say that was the plan, that his father didn't want to go back to North Korea, but he had no other way than repaying his paymaster, so being buried there. And Choi Jin-wha would be kind of the other person, but not the in person, if you like.
Right. Yeah.
Everyone was, there's a third group. There are only 3 groups of people in Europe. It's called the All European Taekwondo Federation. They then disagreed with that movement and formed a third group, So a third group was born who did not appreciate Choi Jin-wha saying it's going back to North Korea, didn't appreciate General Choi giving it to the North Koreans. So then they formed their group, which is the group which has got the fist now with all the belt colours in it. It's called ITF.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a story there about how it happened and who is the rightful owner of what, if you might say. Unfortunately, from that day on, many people that fall out with one of those groups form another ITF. So it's quite a joke now, isn't there? Which ITF are you?
It's gone a bit scattergun, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, my talks at the moment are with the original 3 to form some clear knowledge about that history, because that would identify who should be, talking and sharing. These other ones are causing us a bit of a headache, but hey, we can't do much about that. I mean, 1979, we spoke about the first championships I went to abroad with Kenny and Dave Murray and Brian Nelson. Was where the AETF was actually formed. The European arm of the original ITF was formed in Oslo in 79. The championships that me and Kenny and the guys were at.
Okay.
And that's in the encyclopedia. If you read the encyclopedia on the front cover, it gives you the history, and it says 1979 was when the AETF was founded, and we were at that. I know I refer to Kenny, but there were others, but because Kenny's one of your known people,
Yeah, sure.
We were at that together, and we would fight, maybe 2:00 in the morning.
Right.
Them championships didn't have a finishing time, did they?
That's right. Finals, everyone would wait to the final.
Yeah,
and that'd be the last event of the night.
In fact, that was always a funny one. In 79, we were at the tournament, and the fight, it was delayed, and a couple of us had fallen asleep under a low gymnastic beam. They used to have practice beams, I think, were 6 inches off the floor, 8 inches.
Yeah.
And we slid our heads under there. And then, of course, there was this, UK are on, and as we all jumped up, I think we had 2 black eyes before we even got
Brilliant.
Before we even got to the ring.
It was hard, though. Those competitions back in those days, again, they just dragged on for so long, didn't they? You used to register at like 9 o'clock in the morning, and then you used to have there was no board, was there? There was no itinerary of the day. You just basically got fought when they could be bothered to call you, and you used to get warmed up, then you used to cool down again, then you used to warm up again, then you used to cool down. And by the time you got to fight, it was all down to your preparation and your fitness and your nutrition and how you could handle your nerves as well, wasn't it? On the day.
It was all part of it, wasn't it? I mean, I think what probably is an error these days is that, when you're at competitions and you're at them yourselves and your students come up and go, what time are we on? What time are we on? When are we finishing? And then we all go, do you know what? When we start.
Well, now, of course, we just say, look on the app.
Yeah.
Go and have a look on the app.
So I think we're probably quite bored in our, don't ask me that question, but, things have changed. And to be fair, we have to learn from some very professional groups. I mean, if you take WT, World Taekwondo, everything's to a time, isn't it?
Yes.
And that, I think, is something quite special. And I think we should always learn from these groups, how they're doing it, what they're doing, and
Yeah, because people have got no tolerance now, have they? People have got no tolerance for waiting around. Everything is instant. Everything you do is instant now. And if you've got to wait 5 minutes for something, people are like, well, I'm not going to bother with that.
No, you're right. You're right. But of course, it's, training's changed, isn't it? Like we would just go to the competition and have our bit of takeaway food and eat throughout the day. Now they're like, what time are you fighting? 10 o'clock. Right, at 9:30, I must have my banana and my biscuit.
That's right, yeah.
And then if they've had that, and then they don't fight, they've got this sort of glucose rush, haven't they? Then they stag.
Well, that's all part really of the development, isn't it? So the physical development and some of the better lessons, the nutrition, and I suppose a lot more now. Certainly when I was fighting under Kenny in the TAGB squad, we used to do a lot of sports psychology. Making sure that particularly, I suppose, but not so myself, I was long in the tooth there then, and not much could change my mind in what I wanted to do. But for a lot of the younger fighters, it was about building their confidence, getting them into that right frame of mind. And I suppose that was one of the really good things with Kenny, Master Walton. He was always keen to introduce new techniques, new learning, and incorporate that, and that continued to give us, I suppose, the team the competitive edge. Always an early adopter of good ideas. And even in his heyday, he was an adopter of good ideas. I think he won't mind me saying he used to do ballet dancing to help his flexibility.
No, I wouldn't surprise me with Kenny. Kenny's, and you're right. You have to look at different things, don't you?
Most definitely.
But that's what makes people, I think, like him. Like your father, like Ron, like Paul, or certainly, Kenny was more on my competitive sort of side of things. That's what made him, quite special. That he was willing to learn from other things, from other ideas. Yes. And hopefully, hopefully I'm on that page too, because a lot of grandmasters of these days, think that they are grandmasters of everything, don't they? The school accounting, the school gym, the promotion, the social media, the bloody whatever it is, all of it. But you're not. All I know is how to motivate a team of fighters to do well.
Yeah.
It is. It's interesting. We do. Gavin and I, as part of the motivated martial artist piece, we do a lot of development, personal development. I'm reading a really good book at the moment called Ranges, and it basically pits people off against the Tiger Wood story to the Roger Federer story. So one was specific from the age of 2 months in golf, and the other one didn't pick up tennis really till he was about 15, but he'd sampled all different types of sports. And it's the argument between being a absolute specialist or someone with a range of skills. Worth a read if you ever get the chance to. Ranges. Yeah, I think as we move into the world now, there's so much more that comes into play, like you already mentioned: social media, marketing, fitness, nutrition, business applications, accounting. You have to have a broad knowledge of everything, just to I suppose survive these days. Whereas before, you would leave it to your accountant, or you wouldn't have an app. Social media, you go to the paper, know a friend who's a journalist, and he'd write you a write-up, and that'd be it. But there's so much more to being, I suppose, a martial arts instructor, and certainly more for being someone in your position as being a head of an association, because you have to look at what else is happening out there. So you look at what Team GB is doing in let's say in judo. And take some of their learning and what X is doing in this particular business. So a dance school and a dance association. How does that organization run? How does it manage its people? How does it look at all those other facets of not just the execution of the art, but also the everything else that circulates around it? It's just as important, I think.
You're right, and if you don't broaden that knowledge, you're going to restrict yourself from other avenues of support. I mean, we as I don't know if you're aware or know that, but I obviously sit with the British Taekwondo Council.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when we look, I've been there since '88 when the council was, founded, on the board as a non-voting member, then a voting member, and then I was their secretary for a number of years. I still am. And then we realised that by change, yes, I do Taekwondo. Yes, I've got a big school. I've got 300 members in my school. I've got 3 full-time centres. I've got, an activity. I also get involved very much with the boxing, and their sort of systems. But I realised that you have to have a different, if you want to link in with Sport England or Sport Scotland or Northern Ireland or UK sport, the way that we are running, you and me or Gavin or anyone who's got a full-time school, which is about making sure you survive. In order to achieve a broader fund or a broader partner relationship, you've got to understand about non-executive roles, executive roles, public funds, good for purpose. What are your self-assurance? What are your national code of governance? You have to start experiencing a whole different brand of knowledge or understanding.
That's right. Yeah.
And that no one can own anything in public funding. You have to be, appointed, and then you do a certain term. So I took that mantle on for the sport for British Taekwondo Council, and managed to get Sport England funding, which we never had before. We've had 2 4-year terms now and a 2-year term, so we've managed to get funding now for 10 years through a change of mindset. What is it? You don't get £500,000 from Sport England and say, right, here are instructors, here's £100 each. You've got to have programs and themes and ideas. And right. What is the national project? More girls. I think you found that through the TFB. Yeah. This girl can get the girls in. That was because all that happens is the 46 sports, and Taekwondo being one of them, has to link in to what the national objective is. So UK sport will say, right, for the next 4 years, we want more women. And that filters down to the home nations, who then filters down to the governing bodies, BTC being one of them, that are in it. So whether you're doing gymnastics, basketball, or Taekwondo, you're all governed with the same outcome: get more women involved. Yeah, because you are contributing to the national statistic. Yeah. And I was involved in that local swimming clubs. I learned a little bit about governance, how you would exec officers, what their roles are. So I had quite a nice broad mind about, you can be in charge of your club, but you can't be in charge of an organisation. That has to be democratic. Yes. And to give confidence. And then by changing, we got involved with Sport England and got funded, which was great. That we were funded, and we've just finished in our second 4-year term. And hopefully we'll get there. So I sit as the CEO of the British Taekwondo Council, and work very closely with British Taekwondo, the WTR of the Taekwondo. So me and Ian Leith try to do a regular, twice a week call, just to make sure that the British Taekwondo, the WTF people are doing what we're doing. Yeah, so we're not in competition with each other. We're trying to support each other in different. Sure. I suppose like rugby league and rugby union.
Yes, well, it's the same goal, isn't it? To deliver, make sure that their sport prospers. And if you're looking for support from government agencies, you've got to be aligned to those objectives.
Yeah, especially for the grassroots stuff as well. It's important, isn't it? It's important that we keep having funding for the grassroots sports.
It is, and it's understanding what the grassroots is and where they got to go and what your plan is and what your initiative, what expectations are. Inclusion, confidence, self-awareness, community involvement, alternative provision. All of those ideas. It's not the kid coming in who you want to be in your British team. No. It's your kid coming in. Yeah.
I mean, that's probably what 1% of the people that walk through the doors of an organisation, if that.
Yes. You're right.
Yeah, you really look to cater.
Yeah, that 1% shop window, isn't it? That's the trouble.
Yeah, it is.
If someone watches your competition, they look at that 1% and it encourages them to join, and yet they will not be the competitor. So there's a lot of education there for us to learn. I think we've got to go on a different advertising program for our schools to assist them. Not the winners and gold medalists, but the what's the benefits? What's the key benefits of being in a club? Is it social? Is it part of something? Is it mental strength? Is it shoulders to fall on? Is it just a bit of exercise as well?
And I'll tell you what, there's never going to be a better time, I don't think, personally, for martial arts now, coming out of this pandemic. If you can have the right mindset, and if you can build your club in a way where it's supporting the kids and supporting the mental health and supporting the physical and the mental well-being and the social, development aspects of it, rather than just the punching and kicking side, because the media has already done a lot of that work for us over the pandemic, haven't they?
so right, yeah. When I do my workshops, and as I mentioned before, we opened up into the podcast. And I'm on screen and I'm introducing who might be teaching today. It might be me. And then I say, on today, you're part of the 300 people that have signed in today. Take comfort for that community. You're not alone in this pandemic. That community is standing around you in this podcast. Oh, not this podcast, but this Zoom session, that I was having. And, it's trying to re-engage with them and say, there is mental strength here from that community you're part of. I mean, TAGB is 20,000 strong. You're certainly, obviously, pandemic will put pressure on that. But that is the strength of that. If you're up north or down south, you've got somebody you can pick up the phone and call. And there aren't many sports that can give that, and we need to champion that. That's become
champion it and leverage it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly it. The value of being in a Taekwondo club, not a UK ITF club, not a TAGB, not a UKTA, in a Taekwondo school.
Yeah,
which has obviously got the right credentials, but for that value of mental strength and community spirit. And
you can see it from your own students. I mean, I've had loads of students that have sort of said to me, it's these classes that have kept me going. I've had nothing else. It's these classes that have kept me going, doing my patterns in my living room, or doing the fitness, the fitness one that we do once a week, or even just doing the line work and the set sparring, and it's just keeps them going.
Yeah. No, it's listening, isn't it, and being part of that. And it makes you feel pretty good, though, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
And we were saying, people say, "Oh, why do you do the podcast?" And it is to do exactly that. Get these stories out to people. Get people that are not necessarily put in front of people, because actually, we have the audience that we have now are quite committed to us. They listen to the episodes, and it gives them that thing to look forward to on that boring drive. It used to be the boring drive on the way to work on a Monday morning, but now it's that. Okay, that's my Monday morning plan. I know new episodes coming out. So that one gives us that commitment to want to make sure that we're putting those episodes out for people. And it's exactly the same in our martial arts school when we're scheduling those classes on a Tuesday and a Thursday and a Saturday morning. Of course, we're like everybody else. Sometimes you're just absolutely fed up. You don't want to do it. But it's that commitment you're making to your martial arts fraternity community. And that, and that just inspires people, I think. So I think as a martial artist, we've been saying it for a long time, you're more than just an instructor. Teaching a martial art, you're a mentor, you're a coach. You've got quite a responsible role.
Yes, it's right, and you've got to know how to gauge it, haven't you? When people need. I mean, we're involved in a lot of what we call alternative provision at the moment. These are schools. In fact, I'm going to be working with the BTC to try and link with Sport England on this. Schools where the children have been excluded due to mental pressures or abilities or their behaviours. Because it's proven that the martial arts, not just the Taekwondo, but all martial arts, do give an outlet for them kids to sort of participate and feel they can do well. It gives them a confidence. But that alternative provision now, I think, is becoming quite serious in the field that we're running, and that highlights what you've just said. You're not just a martial arts instructor. You want to bring them out of their issues in school, put them onto the bags, put them into some training, and they look at you as they're not in competition with you. They're looking at you for support. Yeah. Whereas because they know that you can punch and kick, or you're not there to prove that, are you? You're there to give something else. And that's why, a lot of boxing academies now have linked with alternative provision, because the kids don't look to fight the boxing coach because they know they have an ability. Yeah. What can we learn from you? And that's big. I'm actually trying to really work with Innovating Minds, which is a charity on mental health, British Taekwondo Council, Sport England, to be a very new drive in what's good about Taekwondo for the communities. And
fantastic. That's good to hear, actually, really good to hear. So Trevor, we're coming towards the end of the podcast now. So one thing I'd like to know, you're obviously very driven, you're very motivated. What, through the pandemic and moving out of the pandemic, what's been motivating? What's your motivation?
Well, I think the pandemic has made us all change. It's made us realize that things that you can do close to home are probably more important than anything. We have national organisations, we have international organisations, but they can't help you through this. And yet they're the ones that have given you the foundations to be able to do what you do now. So we can't dismiss them, but there's a time and place for everything, isn't there? And I think what the pandemic has done is said, your club or Gavin's club or my club has to become the centre and source of activity with the foundations we've learned from our national group and our international groups. So look close at home, make sure your own house is in order, make sure that what you are teaching is up to date, what you can offer is of quality, and then realize that what you share with your national or international organizations is quite separate. You're part of it, but that doesn't own you. But you can't do what you do unless you're part of it. So there's a very fine balance about teach Taekwondo, because I was taught by my instructor that was in a national organization, which was in international. That gives me the tools. And now I can do what I do, but to have exit routes for either competition or gradings, I need my national. But make sure your home is in order and value the national and international bodies. Don't criticize them, because it's what they've given you. I always say this to a lot of people that might have these quite wild ideas. I said, you were the greatest athlete, and you said to me, why do I have to go squad training? I'm the best. And then you become the coach. And I said to you, how are you going to choose your team? I've got to come squad training. Oh, you have a different attitude now, because when you was the best, you didn't want to go squad. Now
you didn't want to come.
Now you're the coach. The only way you're going to choose your team is coming squad training. And now, since 1983, UK ITF, every athlete has been paid to travel when they've been selected for a team since 1983. Never have I said, you're in the British team, but you've got to give me a check to go. 100%, everybody's been paid to go. We sent 100 to Korea, all paid. And we do different schemes. So then I say to this coach, you're now the owner of the body. How are we going to raise money for our elite team to travel? I know, we'll have a membership scheme. And I said, just quickly review where we were. You didn't like squad training. Now you're the coach, you do. Now you raise funds. You didn't like paying membership fees, and now you're the owner. You've got to pay membership.
Yeah.
So when you're saying that you've left an organization because they did this, this, and this, just check whether you're doing the same thing.
Yeah. No, definitely. Trevor, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on this morning. Do you know what? I could sit here and talk to you for hours more, I'm sure. So I think we're going to
thank you for having me.
And we have to schedule a part two.
I think we do. I think we definitely need to get a part two. There's too many stories in that head of yours, I think, Trevor, that we need to try and squeeze out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In the best possible way, of course.
It's just great. I do appreciate you bringing me on, because you're busy and we're all busy. But and I enjoy sharing it with you. If it helps others, so be it, and that's what I'm destined to do, I hope.
Fantastic. Brilliant. I think you're doing an absolutely fantastic job with the BTC Sport England, bringing those new ideas, new processes to fruition, obviously to help support the instructors and the other organisations within the BTC.
I appreciate your kind comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Trevor.
Okay, then. Take care. Have a good day, everyone.
See you soon. Bye-bye. Bye. I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode of the Motivated Martial Artist podcast. Don't forget to check out our Facebook page and our Facebook group, the Motivated Martial Artist podcast.
And don't forget also the Motivated Martial Artist Instagram page.
So head along for some extra content, interviews and much more.
So until next week, it's bye from Jackson
and Gavin,
the Motivated Martial Artists.